by asking you all a question. If I started at that end of the stage and took 30 steps in this direction, okay, say my steps are about this big, I would find myself, maybe I would walk from that end of the stage to this, right? But if I asked you to take, if you asked me to take 30 exponential steps from that point of the stage this way, where do you think I'd be? And let me explain what exponential steps are in case you don't know. It's when you double each time you take a step. So the first time I take 1, the second time I take 2 steps, the third time I take 4 steps, and then 8, and then 16, and then 32, and so on. Maybe I'll be outside this building, around the field somewhere, down the subway. If I told you that taking 30 exponential steps will have taken me 25 times around the circumference of the earth, it begins to give you an idea of what kind of changes we are talking about in our world today. And that's what my talk is going to be about. I work on global cooperation issues in my job. I've done it in a peacekeeping mission. I've done it in disarmament of weapons of mass destruction. I'm doing it currently with international development issues. And the task of me and my colleagues is really to figure out how best to operationalize global cooperation to really study and advance and make progress on the shared issues of our time. And we think, and I personally think, that something very remarkable is happening around us today. Something remarkable, something exponential. I feel like this is a tipping point in history. And we may be standing on the brink of what I think, at the inauguration of the 2020s, is the world's first truly global decade. Let's look at some of these exponential changes that are happening. I'll just explain what that word means. To put it more simply, it means first something happens slowly, and then it happens all at once, right? That's a nice phrase. It's a nice way to sort of look at what these changes are. It's the same with global cooperation. History's trajectory started with us being hunters and gatherers, and then we organized ourselves into small, disparate communities. Then we organized ourselves into governments and nations, and then we gave ourselves instruments of global governance, like the United Nations, the multilateral system. Look at the connections between us now. I'm not just talking about, oh, I connect so easily with other people on the internet, and we have these shared cultural artifacts, right? But those are also true. I mean, look at how interconnected we are as a culture. We know in any room, in any auditorium of the world, if I said something very, very small, very specific, right? If someone posts in social media that they're having a bad day, you know that you can react to it, right? You can react to it, you can sad react to it, you probably can't lol react to it. Now that's a very specific cultural artifact, but people in every room in any part of the world know what that is. But then let's look at more concrete numbers. 25% of the world's growth today, the world's GDP, is trade, the sharing of commodities and products between nations. 250 million people out of the world's population today are migrants. 40 million of those are refugees, and that brings me to the point of how our challenges are now shared. Climate change, environmental degradation. This is not something that one country or one community can look at it. It's not a New York problem or a New Delhi problem. Climate change is fundamentally a global problem that cannot be solved by one country or one government acting alone. And look at how exponentially these connections got made. Facebook today, just to give you an example, has about more than 2.5 billion users. But then, you know, it took it 10 years to get there. Look at TikTok. I know all of you know what TikTok is. You're either addicted to it or you're on it. One of those two things is true. It took TikTok only 2 years to acquire 500 million users. This is how quickly we are making connections. The two other very remarkable things, I think, that have happened to us in this decade is, one, like I said, we are now confronted with increasingly very global challenges, but we're also increasingly confronted with global solutions. The UN, for example, is overseeing about 300 different kinds of conventions and treaties on different issues, and it has successfully negotiated or been part of over 195 peace agreements of different kinds. Technology is growing exponentially. I find it truly remarkable that we put men on the moon in the 1960s. It's so difficult to even think about the 60s. What is this decade? It was so long ago. If you didn't know any better, you would think movies were black and white in the 60s, right? But even in my lifetime, I don't think I'm very old, but I remember there being dial-up modem internet, and a lot of you who are watching this talk don't know what a dial-up modem is, but I remember. So it started slowly, and then it happened all at once. Today we have artificial intelligence, we have machine learning, we are developing authority, sometimes lethal autonomy, to machines that we have given algorithms to make decisions on our behalf. Right? Those are the exponential changes that are happening. And why I think this is significant is because this is our opportunity to really take this opportunity, take these exponential changes and do something big with them. At the end of these 10 years, at the end of the 20s, the world is going to look very different. And so I want to talk about the three big things I think the world, especially young people, should be taking action on right now, today, so that we can course correct. And the next 10 years are the decade of solutions, where we start making those transformational changes, because now we have the tools and opportunity to do so. Number one, the number one change that I think we need to make, and it is absurd that this is still happening, this is the beginning of the 2020s. We need to get rid of inequality. We need to level the playing field. Right? And now you've heard about it said in technical terms, like of course we need to lift millions of people out of extreme poverty. We need to make sense of the fact that there are so many people who don't have access to basic services. How do we accelerate that? But at the same time, we have so much prosperity in the world. But what has that amounted to when we look at the disparities in such a democratic shared space of information that is happening around us? Let's look at it this way. Another amazing statistic I'm going to throw at you is that 1% of the world's population currently controls 50% of the world's wealth. And the bottom half, 3.8 billion people around the world, control only 1%. Completely the inverse. 26 billionaires in the world today control 50% of the growth and the wealth of the world. So obviously you're thinking some of these guys probably have wealth that is bigger than a few companies, maybe it's bigger than a few countries. Let's take one example, and you can look up who this billionaire is. I don't want to say his name, but he's one of the richest men in the world. And his total wealth is equivalent to the GDP, the entire economy of the 48 poorest countries in the world. 48 poorest countries in the world is equivalent to one person's wealth. 1% of his wealth is the entire health budget of the government of Ethiopia. I think if we can start making changes that level the playing field for people. I'm not talking about doing anything, to curb the wealth of millionaires. I'm talking about making prosperity available to those who have been left the farthest behind. And here is a quick win solution when it comes to inequalities. Change the circumstances and outcomes for women. Fight for gender equality. And this is not just, we discriminate against women, we, have prejudiced ideas about them, or we, make fun of the fact that they're fashionable. Not that. A woman in the world today is 25 times more likely to be extremely poor than men. That is a fact. Women today own only 12% of all agricultural land, and overall less than 20% of the world's land. That's a fact. It's the 20s, and it's absurd that we allow that kind of inequality to persist. Number two, we have to save the planet. These are not my words. In the next 10 years, we have to save the planet. Our words coming from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that has told us that we only have 12 years left to save the world from getting to unsustainable temperature rises. And this is not just about polar bears floating away on a melting glacier. When I say climate change, I mean poor coastal communities are going to get affected. Millions of people will become refugees because of climate-induced drought and famine and other climatic conditions. Air pollution today has actually reduced people's and one individual's lifespan on average by 2 years globally. That is astounding. And the only way we can move forward and make sure our decade is sustainable is by dealing with climate change. Number three, and this is my final point, we need to make robots do good. And if I'm going to say that in a more technical way, we need to nurture a fourth industrial revolution that works for the people. Frontier technologies can no longer just be the domain for R&D that militaries do with their $2,000 trillion a year military expenditure. Technology needs to work for us. These social media networks, so extensive, where we all are participating as young people, need to be networks where we can create allies and movements so that we can extend the benefits of this momentous decade to those who have been left the farthest behind. I urge you all to consider what big changes you're going to make, because this moment in history has never come before. And this is not the time to take 30 small steps. Great though it is, you can't just take 30 small steps. I'm going to urge you all to take 30 exponential steps, so that by the time we are done with the 2020s, we have changed the world 25 times over. Thank you very much.